Racism and all other forms of discrimination come from a singular human behavior. The problem is that it's a behavior we all have to different degrees without realizing it. So today I would love to talk about the logic behind tolerating people. My goal is that knowing the logic behind how discrimination works gives you some peace of mind instead of frustration the next time you witness this tragic behavior, and also so that you can get rid of this behavior that in small quantities affect the very nature of how your relationships evolve. What is discrimination, you ask? It is when people go, hey, I noticed you're different from me, so I guess I just have to be an asshole now. Basically, it's a rejection because of a core element within people's nature. But why or why do people engage in this lousy behavior? Well, it's simple. Humans despise what is different, what they don't understand. Like algebra, or why phones keep getting bigger but pants pockets stay the same. Think about it, someone dislikes another person's sexual orientation because they haven't walked a mile in those particular shoes, or they can't fathom the challenges of a disability because they have never faced them. It's a classic case of I don't get you, so I guess I don't like you. But here is the kicker. The root of discrimination is actually baked into all of us to some extent. That's right, even you, sitting here thinking, but I'm a good person. The thing is, most people don't wear a badge saying, hello, I'm a racist. They just don't realize that their actions or thoughts can be discriminatory. So understanding why people discriminate not only will make you happier because you'll get less frustrated, but also you will end up becoming a better person yourself. Or at least you can pretend to be one on social media, which is nearly the same thing. So why is it that people despise what is different to them? Because of how empathy works. But what is empathy? It is when you can put yourself in other people's shoes, and hopefully working back to return them, because that's technically theft. But there is a problem with empathy. It is actually really hard to imagine being in other people's shoes without experiencing it. It's like the brain's version of trying to play a VR game without the headset. You can sort of understand what's going on, but you're not getting the full experience. For example, you can try to empathize with a billionaire, but you will never understand what it's like to forget the numbers of zeros in your bank account. That's why billionaires have so much haters, and not because of this. Have you ever completely flipped your opinion on someone after you found yourself in their shoes? Suddenly, you're the one juggling a screaming kid in the supermarket, remembering all the times you judge your parents for not keeping that child quiet. Yeah, that's because you now have empathy. You can now imagine being in another person's shoes because you've lived it. Now, does that mean that if you haven't lived it, you can't have empathy? Well, yes, at least not fully. Why? Because empathy works based on knowledge. So if you have no knowledge, it will be really hard to empathize. But what can you do then? Well, the solution is to admit ignorance, which is harder than it sounds. It's about recognizing we might never understand someone's action fully, and that's okay. It's not about judging, but about acknowledging our own limitations. The second important thing is that there is no one correct way of living. If you grew up in a different settings, say a different country or culture, you wouldn't be you. You'd be a different version of you, thinking you're just as right as you think you are right now. Normally, when you see someone doing something different, a weird sentiment starts to grow within you. It's like an internal alarm bell that says, alert, this thing is weird and weird is wrong. Spoiler alert, it's not. Well, except when writing down dates as months, dates, and year. Seriously, what is wrong with you? I mean, it's day, then month, then year. But yeah, no, there is no correct way of living. We are all just making it up as we go along. The world is made of a bunch of communities, each with their own flavors and rules, and just because you're used to one flavor doesn't make it the universal taste. Now, there is this notion floating around that discrimination is like a one-way street. For example, non-white people can be racist, or that non-straight people can discriminate against straight people. And of course they can. To discriminate is just rejecting someone because of a core element of their nature. It is not important what core element it is. This notion that my group can be discriminating because we've been oppressed is a dangerous path. It's the same old song that fueled racism, sexism, and all other isms through the ages. You could say that systematic discrimination is in fact a weapon made by dominant groups throughout history to maintain power. And while this has been true for a long time, it is important to understand why it has worked so well. And that's because of the sheep mentality we all have to some degree. We crave affirmation like it's a Black Friday and validation is on sale. If I don't share the same values as everyone else, society might ostracize me. And that's the problem. If you always follow what everyone else thinks, then you leave no room for improvement. Here's a fun fact. Going against the flow is actually how you swim upstream. I should clarify that there is a difference between who you really are and who you are within society. So you should watch this video to understand better what I'm trying to say. Now let's be honest. You probably will not change society's way of thinking, but it is more important to change what you think. If you want to change the world, the only power you have is changing yourself, and you can also influence your circle and let it ripple out. But other than that, you have to accept that it will take time for society to change. The bright side of it is that we live in the best version of society that's ever existed. I mean, it wasn't long ago that women couldn't vote and owning people was a horrific reality. We've come a long way. Back then, you could get in serious trouble for just saying society could be better. Now you can tweet about it, get retweeted a couple of times, and still change absolutely nothing. You may think that we are not all good people, and that some discriminate willingly. And that is true, but it is not a good idea to get personally involved with our past. History's had its villains, sure, but they're not us. We're just the audience that's left cleaning up the popcorns after the show's ended. If you really want to correct the wrongful action of the past, social justice is not the way to go. Why? Because it's like attempting to conjure apologies from the spirits of past bigots. And let's face it, ghosts are notoriously unreliable at conversations. There is no correcting the past, what is done is done, but you can influence the present. You can't challenge ghosts, but you can remodel the haunted house. And that's by changing the way you think and influence others. Here is another hot take. People generally don't have bad intentions. Most people are not twirling their villain mustache while plotting nefarious deeds. 99% of people act the way they do because of the way they were raised. It's nurture over nature. Believing someone is intentionally evil is like expecting a cat to bark. It's not only improbable, but you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Of course, people that discriminate do have a heavy responsibility, but getting angry at them is not the solution. The only solution is waiting for them to get old and pass away, leaving society with brighter minds. The truth about why people discriminate boils down to our obsession with differences. But if you zoom out past the stratosphere, beyond the stars, to a viewpoint from a galaxy far, far away, we all blend into a single dot. From that cosmic perspective, all of us humans look pretty much the same, tiny and confused. Perhaps it is time to acknowledge how small we are and cherish the fact that in the vast emptiness of space, we are not alone.